Outside the Box reviews, they're all gonna laugh at you. We're taking a look at the NECA Carrie 2013 action figure. This is one of the two figures NECA did from the most recent remake of Carrie. I don't think either figure had a specific name, I think they both were just Carrie, but this was the slightly harder one to get your hands on. Toys R Us refused to carry this version, no pun intended, and they only had the clean version, the pre-Pig's Blood version of Carrie. And who the hell wants that? I picked this up at my local movie stop. They had it for a pretty inexpensive price, which is really the only reason I picked up this figure, because this figure, articulation-wise at least, makes the old cult classics line look super articulated. But let's see how the rest of it is before we go judge that articulation. I think NECA did a pretty good job with the sculpt and paint on this figure. It definitely does have a likeness to Chloe Grace Moretz, though not as good of one as they had with the Hit Girl figure later on. The blood on here is overall a little cartoony, especially on the face. It's kind of a matte red there on the face. If you look at her hands, you can see the one with a glossier red, which I much prefer. Looks much more like blood to me. But the soak through on her hair is really nice. They added a black wash to it to kind of bring out the wet hair underneath. I think that actually came out really, really nice. Face just doesn't do a whole lot for me. It's decently sculpted, but just that blood splatter on it doesn't really look all that great. Go around to the back, you can see the hair. It is a soft rubberized material, and it splits over her shoulder, but we have some nice stringy, bloody hair coming back here that looks pretty darn good. You can see her shoulders completely covered. They did do a pretty good job of leaving the underside of things less bloody, as it should be since the blood hit her from above. Her hands are in this kind of weird pose, her flexing telepathic pose. You can see her little, what is it, a corsage or whatever on her wrist there. More blood effect dripping down. You can definitely see there's areas where it's a much shinier blood, then it gets to that matte blood and just looks more like paint than it does blood in certain areas, which is a bit of a bummer. Her dress, same idea here, very, very bloody over, well, I think it was supposed to be a pink dress, but it looks really white here where it isn't bloody, which is kind of interesting. There's a tie here in the back that is also rubberized, giving a little extra detail there. The whole lower bit is also rubberized, which doesn't really matter since there's no articulation under it. You can see a fairly visible seam here where the rubberized piece connects, but it also kind of works with the way the dress would have had its seams done and everything. If you want to be a complete perv, you can kind of look up the skirt here and see that she does have legs sculpted in there. She does have shoes done, little high heel shoes, no peg holes or anything, but she doesn't really need them. And yeah, so we're doing this on my channel now. Let's not. For articulation, Carrie has a ball joint at the base of the head. It will look up and down as well as side to side and tilts. And that's it. No more. We're done. For a size comparison, here's Carrie next to Fred Krueger. And I picked this one just because it's a fairly normal sized human character to go alongside Carrie. We really don't get a whole lot of horror characters that are human. Pretty much Ash, these two, Mrs. Voorhees, everything else kind of gets a little crazier. But she stands about as tall as I'd expect her to. I mean, Robert Englund's not exactly a short man, but he's not very tall either. Comes up to about his shoulder. I think that would work pretty well. I feel like the only reason this Carrie figure got made was because it was a chance to do a Stephen King property. Historically, King hasn't really been too willing to allow companies to do action figures based on his movies. As far as I know, all the really cool 12-inch Shining figures are all basically customs. There's never really been a movie-accurate version of Pennywise the Clown, and I could totally see why the opportunity to do a figure of one of Stephen King's most iconic characters would be really, really tempting. But I also think NECA knew that this movie wasn't going to be a big hit. That at the end of the day, the original would be remembered as the favorite movie, and this would just be another failed remake attempt. And I think the lack of articulation here kind of shows that they weren't really expecting this figure to do too well, and didn't put a whole lot of resources into it. For a figure that's just going to sit on the shelf and exist there, it's not a bad figure. The detailing on it is pretty good, but there's just nothing here that's special in the least, and even with limited articulation, if it was a Sissy Spacek Carrie, I probably would have enjoyed it a heck of a lot more. Figure gets a not recommend. There's really nothing in this figure that excites me in the least, but if, like me, you find it dirt cheap at a store, it's not the worst thing to pick up, and even though it's from a less iconic movie, it does represent an iconic scene in horror cinema, which is why I ended up caving and getting it. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, username Outside the Box Reviews. Also check me out on Facebook, link below, and until next time, this has been another Outside the Box Reviews, and I can see your dirty pillows.